Easy to tell. The prettiest faces can hide the ugliest facets of humanity. Although this couple looks like Ken and Barbie, they're ready to sell their souls to the devil.
Once upon a time, in a small town in the outskirts of Toronto, there was a pretty little girl named Karla Homolka.
She was a real girl's girl. She liked to wear frilly dresses. She liked to play Barbie. She had to be in charge when she was playing Barbie. And some of her friends have written that they grew very tired of it.
Even into her early teen years, Karla can't let go of her love of fantasy.
She lived in something of a dream world. She loved Disney characters, and she loved princesses.
Karla is smart, popular, and lots of fun to be around. She's an attentive student, but career-minded she's not. Her main goal after graduation is landing an engagement ring.
In high school, she was the leader of a small group of women called the Diamond Club. She was smart. She could have gone to university, but she wanted the diamond and she wanted the man who went with it. She wanted to get married and make a home of her own.
Meanwhile, less than 50 miles away, a boy named Paul Bernardo is growing up in the charming Toronto suburb of Scarborough.
Paul Bernardo was apparently a very well-adjusted, or appeared to be a very well-adjusted boy. He was a polite, cute, gregarious kid.
The perfect little angel, but for the fact that he's a peeping Tom.
He started in his own neighborhood. He would hide behind the bushes. He would watch some of the young girls get undressed. He was caught a couple of times. A cop came and said, "Look, cut it out." They put it down to prankish, teenage, emerging sexuality, I guess. And so there, Paul got away with it.
Life carries on for the cocky youngster, much as it had before. And by the time he gets to college, he's a popular and charming ladies' man.
For all intents and purposes, was much like any other young fellow from the Scarborough area.
Except for the fact that Paul is hiding some disturbing sexual kinks.
He just wasn't satisfied with normal intercourse. He needed that abusive, rough, choking to really get him excited, and he didn't realize what he was doing. Maybe this is painful to them, maybe they don't like it.
Most of Paul's dates don't come around for a repeat performance, but he's about to meet his match. Little Karla Homolka is all grown up now, but this Barbie is still searching for her Ken doll. When Karla's 17, the vet clinic she works at after school sends her to a pet convention in Scarborough.
What Karla Homolka said she really wanted to do was to go to Toronto to meet guys.
And sure enough, over dinner, a young man walks in and catches her eye. He introduces himself as Paul Bernardo, now a 23-year-old accountant with a prestigious international firm.
He's a handsome-looking guy, blonde-haired, outgoing, seemingly very self-confident, and I think in her mind she's looking down the road thinking, here's my Ken and here's the perfect situation.
When she met Paul Bernardo, he checked every box. He was tall, he was blonde, he was blue-eyed, he was educated, he had a university degree. He had a good job, he was well-paid, and most importantly, he was ambitious. He was ambitious for wealth and for status, two of the things that Karla Homolka desperately wanted. So she fell crazy, madly, hypnotically in love.
And within hours, she's in bed with him, having photographs taken. I'm going like, okay, that's pretty quick. And I think from that moment on, the two of them found whatever they were looking for in the other, and regrettably, it had this absolutely fantastically bizarre, nasty, and violent streak to it.
The first time Karla Homolka and Paul Bernardo had sex, it was reportedly animalistic. They were at each other. It was constant, it was loud, and apparently they had sex all night.
What happens in that hotel room is one hell of an unholy hookup. A hot, sticky mess of lust and gluttony that'll soon take on a life of its own. And if Carla thinks she's found a Prince Charming, she needs to have her vision checked.
Carla is drawn to Paul's domineering ways. And now that she's found her devilish Ken doll, she will do anything to keep him.
Despite the hearts and flowers, Paul let Carla know that he was very disappointed with her. She hadn't safeguarded her virginity. She had already had her first sexual experience with a high school boyfriend, and Paul never let her forget it, and he demeaned her. She wanted to regain that position of power in Paul's eyes, so she began to do things to make Paul realize she would go further than any virgin ever would.
But Carla alone isn't enough to satisfy Paul's violent lust. Little does she know he has an even darker side. In his spare time, Paul begins to rape young teenagers in his Scarborough neighborhood, often stalking his victims as they walk home from the bus stop.
He often spent time trailing a woman that he found attractive or looked appropriate as his victim. He would learn her routine, and he would pounce. Sometimes he was so bold that he jumped women as they were putting the key into the door of their home.
He would drag them into a secluded area and he would rape them.
Sodomy is his preferred MO, with constant verbal humiliation.
Throughout all of this torture, he would have them call themselves names, demean themselves. I deserve this. And he liked to finish by sticking things into their orifices, branches, dirt. He was a vile, vile person who wanted to harm other humans in the worst possible way.
Oh, Paul, such a sick and twisted little monster. One thing you can be sure of, the more he feeds his demons, the hungrier and more violent they'll become.
There was an escalation of violence in his rapes. He was armed with a knife. He used ligatures. He shattered the lives of his sexual assault victims forever.
The rapes carry on for over a year, more than a dozen victims. And all the while, he's still serious with Carla. She remains clueless that her beloved is forever on the prowl. But that's about to change. The person he sets his sights on now lives in the bedroom down the hall. Carla's 13-year-old sister, Tammy. More than a year after Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka met, their twisted relationship is still going strong. Though Carla is an obedient sex slave, Paul longs for something else.
Paul said to Carla, who's all big eyes, and you know, he said, well, actually, I really like your baby sister, Tammy. Imagine what that does to a woman. This is Carla Homolka, who wants everything to be perfect, at least appearance-wise. And he's saying, you know, I actually want to have sex with your little sister.
Carla, she should have just, backed right off and either called the police or told her parents. But I think she was drifting into that dream world of hers, and then she just slid over the edge with him.
If ever there was an excuse to graciously break up with your domineering boyfriend, here it is, coming at you loud and clear. But whatever shred of humanity once existed in Carla Homolka, it's now long gone. She stands by her man and consciously decides to do one of the most depraved, cruel, and self-serving things I've ever heard of. She serves up her own sister to him on a silver platter.
Carla would arrange the folding blinds to make it easier for him to look in Tammy's bedroom when she was undressing, and Carla facilitated all this.
Meanwhile, after more than a dozen rapes in the suburb of Scarborough, police finally have a composite of the suspect.
A bank teller looked at the composite sketch and said, "That's Paul Bernardo." It was really accurate. And they brought him in.
But Paul hardly seems the criminal type.
He was a very well-educated man with a good job, you know, seemingly a good family life, a girlfriend. I mean, he didn't fit the mold of somebody who would be a psychopathic sex villain.
He was articulate, he was attractive, and he was a brilliant liar, as many psychopaths are.
He was asked to volunteer a biological sample, which he did, and the police rated him very low as a suspect.
Instead of testing his DNA right away, the sample goes to the end of the line and sits in storage indefinitely. Seems Bernardo has caught a lucky break. His sense of omnipotence swells even more when Carla reveals her Christmas present to him.
She one day said, "I know how much you love Tammy, and I've stolen drugs from the vet hospital where I work, and I'll drug my sister so that you can take her virginity."
It all starts out with a Christmas Eve dinner out of a magazine. But once Carla's parents go to bed, things go haywire.
Carla and Paul and Tammy were downstairs in the family room while Mr. and Mrs. Homolka were upstairs, and they fed Tammy drinks of alcohol laced with these crushed halcyon tablets that did render her unconscious.
Carla then places a rag soaked with the anesthetic halothane over Tammy's mouth, completely knocking her out.
Paul, you know I love you. Mwah.
The two of them went to town on this poor little girl.
Bernardo demanded that they record all of the rape of Tammy Homolka. And at one point, he apparently demands that she gets down on the floor and performs oral sex on her sister, her little sister. And she does it.
I mean, this was a woman who was as disturbed as Paul was. And how the two of them could ever find one another in the first place is just, you know, it's one of those fates that we just don't understand.
The party ends when Tammy starts throwing up, and then she stops breathing. Instead of calling for help right away, Paul and Carla get busy covering their tracks.
They had to redress Tammy, they had to clean her up, they had to hide all of the evidence of a sexual assault before they called the emergency services.
By the time paramedics arrive, Tammy is already dead.
Police arrived and unfortunately interviewed both Homolka and Bernardo together, so one was aware what the other one was saying. And at one point, a young uniformed officer had to stop Carla from trying to launder a blanket.